The air backstage smelled like cigarette smoke, old wood, and tension. It was late spring 1975. The Roxy Theater in Los Angeles had just hosted a private benefit show, the kind of event where nobody bought tickets and everyone owed someone a favor. The crowd had been small, intimate, full of industry people and musicians who moved through each other's lives like ghosts passing in hallways. The applause had been polite. The vibe had been strange. And now, in the narrow corridor behind the stage, two men stood facing each other in a silence that felt like it had weight. Jackson Browne was 30 years old. His face was lean, boyish, but his eyes carried something heavier. He had just come off stage. His shirt was damp with sweat. His hands were still shaking a little from the adrenaline. He was known for being thoughtful, careful with his words, the kind of person who wrote songs that asked questions instead of giving answers. People called him gentle. Some people mistook that for weakness. Bob Dylan was 33. He stood with his back against the wall, arms crossed, his face half lit by a single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling. He had that look he always had, distant, untouchable, like he was already somewhere else even when he was standing right in front of you. His curls hung loose, his eyes were half closed. He had just watched Jackson's set from the side of the stage and he hadn't clapped. Jackson had noticed. There were other people in the hallway, a sound engineer packing cables, a stage manager talking into a walkie-talkie, a woman in a long coat standing near the exit, smoking, pretending not to listen. But the space between Jackson and Bob felt private, sealed off, like the rest of the world had stepped back to let something happen. Jackson had been carrying this weight for months now, maybe longer. Every interaction with Bob had felt like a test. Every conversation had felt like he was being measured against some invisible standard he could never reach. There were moments when they would be in the same room, surrounded by other musicians, and Bob would look right through him, like Jackson was a window, like he was transparent. Other times Bob would say something sharp, something that felt like a knife wrapped in a joke, and everyone would laugh, and Jackson would smile because that's what you did. You smiled. You pretended it didn't land, but it always landed. Tonight had been different, though. Tonight Jackson had played a new song, something raw, something he hadn't wanted to share yet but felt compelled to. It was about loss, about grief, about the way love leaves scars that never fully heal. The room had gone quiet while he played. He could feel people leaning in. He could feel the weight of their attention. And when he finished, there had been a moment of stillness before the applause came. That rare, sacred moment when a song does exactly what it's supposed to do. And Bob had stood there, silent, his face unreadable, and then he had turned and walked away. That's when Jackson knew he couldn't let it go this time. He couldn't pretend anymore. He couldn't keep swallowing the hurt and calling it professionalism. So he followed him backstage, and now they were here. Jackson spoke first. You didn't like it. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Calm, flat. The kind of thing you say when you already know the answer but you need to hear it said out loud. Bob didn't move. He tilted his head slightly like he was considering whether to respond at all. Didn't say that, Bob said. You didn't have to. The silence that followed was thick, the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. Jackson's jaw tightened. He looked down at his hands, then back up. You've been doing this for a while now, Jackson said. The distance thing, the coldness. Every time I see you, it's like you're testing me, like you're waiting for me to fail. Bob's expression didn't change. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a lighter, flicked it once. The flame caught. He didn't light anything. Just watched it burn for a second, then let it die. Maybe you're too sensitive, Bob said. Jackson laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. Not loud, just enough to break the stillness. Yeah, maybe I am. He took a step closer. Not aggressive, just closer. Enough that Bob had to actually look at him. But that's not what this is about, is it? Bob's eyes flickered, just for a moment, like something had landed. You tell me, Bob said. Jackson's voice dropped, quieter now, but sharper. You think I'm trying to be you. Bob didn't answer. You think I'm chasing something that isn't mine, that I'm some kind of pale copy, that I don't have the weight, the authenticity, whatever it is you think makes someone real. Bob pushed off the wall, stood up straight. He wasn't much taller than Jackson, but in that moment he seemed to take up more space. You're putting words in my mouth, Bob said. No, Jackson said. I'm just saying what you've been thinking for 2 years. The woman by the exit dropped her cigarette. The sound of it hitting the floor made both of them glance over. She didn't move, didn't pick it up, just stood there watching. Jackson turned back. You know what your problem is? Jackson said. You think suffering is a credential. You think if someone hasn't been where you've been, hasn't burned the way you've burned, then they don't get to speak. They don't get to write about pain, or loneliness, or loss, because it's yours. You earned it, and the rest of us are just tourists. Bob's face hardened. His voice stayed low, but there was an edge now. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Jackson's hands clenched into fists, not to fight, just to hold something, to keep himself from shaking. I lost someone too, Bob. Bob went still. Jackson's voice cracked, just a little, just enough. I lost someone, and I didn't write about it to sound deep. I didn't write about it to win your respect. I wrote about it because it was the only thing I could do, because if I didn't, I was going to disappear. The hallway felt smaller now, like the walls had moved in. And you know what? Jackson said. I don't need you to understand that. I don't need you to validate it. But I need you to stop looking at me like I'm pretending, like I'm faking it, like I'm some kid playing dress-up in your clothes. Bob's jaw tightened. His eyes stayed locked on Jackson's. He didn't speak. Jackson took a breath, let it out slow. I looked up to you, Jackson said. I still do, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep shrinking myself so you feel bigger. Bob's voice came out quieter than before, almost a whisper. Nobody asked you to. Jackson nodded, slow, like he was accepting something. You're right, he said. Nobody asked me to. He turned, started walking toward the door. His boots made soft sounds on the concrete floor. He didn't look back, but then Bob spoke. Jackson. Jackson stopped, didn't turn around, just waited. You think I don't see it? Bob said. Jackson's shoulders tensed. You think I don't see the weight you carry? Bob continued. The way you write like every word costs you something, like you're bleeding onto the page and hoping someone notices? Jackson turned his head slightly. Not all the way, just enough. I see it, Bob said. I've always seen it. There was a pause, long, heavy. Then why? Jackson asked. Bob looked down at his hands, at the lighter still resting in his palm. Because I don't know how to be anything else, Bob said. I don't know how to stop being the guy who keeps everyone at arm's length. I don't know how to stop testing people. It's not about you. It's never been about you. Jackson turned around fully now, faced him. Bob's voice was softer than Jackson had ever heard it. I spent so long being the guy everyone wanted something from, the guy everyone projected onto, the guy who couldn't just be a person, and I learned to protect myself by not letting anyone in, by making sure nobody got close enough to hurt me, or disappoint me, or prove that I wasn't what they thought I was. He looked up, met Jackson's eyes. And you, Bob said, you remind me of the part of myself I buried, the part that still believed in something, that still thought songs could mean something, that still thought people mattered. Jackson didn't move, and I resented you for it, Bob said. Because it's easier to resent you than to face the fact that I lost that part of myself a long time ago. The hallway was silent. The woman by the exit had left. The sound engineer was gone. It was just the two of them now. Jackson's voice was quiet. You didn't lose it, he said. You just stopped looking for it. Bob smiled. It was sad, small, almost invisible. Maybe. Jackson stepped forward, slowly. until he was standing right in front of Bob, close enough to see the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion in his face, the loneliness. "I'm not you," Jackson said, "and I'm never going to be. But that doesn't mean I'm less. It doesn't mean what I feel isn't real. It doesn't mean my pain doesn't count." Bob nodded. "Just once." "I know," he said. There was a long stretch of silence between them, not the tense, suffocating kind from before. This was different, softer, like the air itself had changed. Jackson could hear the distant hum of traffic outside, the muffled sound of someone laughing in another part of the building, the faint echo of a guitar being tuned somewhere far away. He thought about all the times he had imagined this conversation, all the things he had wanted to say, all the ways he had practiced confronting Bob in his mind. He had imagined anger. He had imagined vindication. He had imagined Bob finally understanding, finally seeing him, finally admitting that Jackson was worthy. But standing here now, looking at Bob's tired face, Jackson realized he didn't need any of that anymore. He didn't need Bob's approval. He didn't need Bob to validate his pain. He didn't need Bob to tell him he was good enough, because he already knew. "I'm done chasing your approval," Jackson said. "I'm done waiting for you to let me in, but I'm not done caring about you. And I'm not done hoping that one day you'll figure out that pushing people away doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you alone." Bob's eyes glistened. Just for a second, he blinked it away. "You're a better man than I am," Bob said. Jackson shook his head. "No," he said, "I'm just a different one." He extended his hand, not to shake, just to rest it on Bob's shoulder. Bob didn't pull away. For a moment they stood like that. Two men who had traveled different roads but had somehow ended up in the same hallway. Two men who had built their lives around words and melodies and the impossible task of turning pain into something beautiful. Jackson let his hand drop, took a step back. "Take care of yourself, Bob." He turned and walked toward the door. This time, he didn't stop. He pushed through the exit into the cool night air and disappeared into the parking lot. The sky was dark. The stars were hidden behind a layer of smog. The street lamps cast long, lonely shadows across the pavement. Jackson walked to his car, an old Chevy he'd had since before anyone knew his name. He got in, sat there for a minute, his hands on the steering wheel, his breath fogging up the windshield. He thought about the song he had played tonight, the one Bob hadn't clapped for. He thought about the woman who had inspired it, the way she used to laugh, the way she used to look at him like he was the only person in the world, the way she had slipped away from him slowly, painfully, until one day she was just gone. He thought about how he had poured all of that into music, how he had taken the most private, most sacred parts of his grief and made them public, how he had given them to strangers in dark rooms who clapped and cried and told him his songs had saved their lives. And he wondered if it was worth it, if the cost of being a songwriter was giving away pieces of yourself until there was nothing left, if the cost of being honest was being judged by people who thought they knew what honesty looked like, if the cost of being vulnerable was having someone like Bob look at you and see weakness instead of courage. He started the car. The engine coughed once, then hummed to life. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove through the empty streets of Los Angeles. The city felt vast and indifferent, a sprawling maze of broken dreams and second chances. He didn't go home, not right away. He drove to the beach, parked near the pier, walked down to the sand. The ocean was black and endless. The waves rolled in with a steady, hypnotic rhythm. The sound of them was the only thing he could hear. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, eyes on the horizon, and he let himself feel it, all of it, the hurt, the anger, the disappointment, the relief, because that's what he did. He felt things, deeply, completely, without apology. And then he turned it into songs. Back in the hallway, Bob stood alone. The lights flickered once, then stayed on. He looked down at the lighter in his hand, flicked it open, let the flame burn, watched it dance in the dark, Then he closed it. He thought about Jackson's words, about the part of himself he had buried, about the cost of keeping everyone at a distance, about the loneliness that had become so familiar it didn't even feel like loneliness anymore. It just felt like life. He thought about the early days, when he was young and hungry and fearless, when he believed that songs could change the world, when he believed that people mattered, when he hadn't yet learned that fame was a trap and admiration was a burden, and everyone who got close eventually wanted something from you. He thought about the woman he had loved and lost, about the friends he had pushed away, about the bridges he had burned because it was easier than maintaining them, about the walls he had built so high that even he couldn't see over them anymore. And he wondered if Jackson was right, if pushing people away didn't make him stronger, if it just made him alone. He walked down the hallway, slow, his footsteps echoing off the walls. He passed dressing rooms with their doors half open, past posters from old shows, past a mirror hanging crooked on the wall. He stopped, looked at his reflection, studied the face staring back at him, the face that a million people knew, the face that had become an icon, the face that no longer felt like his own. Who was he anymore? Was he the poet, the prophet, the voice of a generation, or was he just a man who had learned to hide so well that he didn't know how to be found? He didn't have an answer. He kept walking, out the back door, into the alley. The night air was cool. The city hummed around him. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. A dog barked. A car alarm went off and then stopped. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, let the smoke fill his lungs, let it out slow. He thought about calling Jackson, about apologizing, about trying to explain, about admitting that he had been wrong, that he had been cruel, that he had projected his own fears onto someone who didn't deserve it. But he didn't, because that's not who he was. He was the guy who walked away, the guy who left things unsaid, the guy who turned pain into mystery and mystery into legend. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe that was always the problem. He finished the cigarette, dropped it on the ground, crushed it under his boot, and he walked into the night, alone. They didn't speak again for a long time. Years passed. Jackson's career grew. He wrote songs that people held on to in their darkest moments, songs about love and loss and the fragile hope that keeps people moving forward. He played to sold-out crowds. He built a life. He married. He had children. He kept writing. And every time he wrote a song, he thought about that night in the hallway, about the words he had said, about the look on Bob's face, about the moment when he realized he didn't need Bob's approval to be whole. That realization had changed everything. It had freed him. Bob kept moving too. He drifted through phases, through sounds, through identities. He stayed untouchable, unreachable. He remained the legend people whispered about but never fully understood. He toured constantly, endless shows in endless cities, different band members, different set lists, different versions of the same songs. He never stayed still long enough for anyone to pin him down. He never gave straight answers in interviews. He never explained himself, because mystery was armor, and he had been wearing it for so long he didn't know how to take it off. But sometimes, late at night, when the shows were over and the crowds had gone home, Bob would sit alone in a dressing room somewhere, and he would think about that hallway, about Jackson's face, about the words that had hung in the air between them, and he would wonder if he had been wrong, not about Jackson, but about himself. He would wonder if the armor he had built so carefully, the walls he had constructed so high, had protected him at all, or if they had just kept him from ever being seen, from ever being known. He would wonder if the loneliness he carried was the price of greatness, or just the consequence of fear, and he would never know the answer, because some questions don't have answers, some choices don't get undone. Some friendships don't survive the weight of two people trying to be more than they are, trying to carry more than they can hold. Jackson never spoke publicly about that night. He didn't write a song about it. He didn't turn it into a story he told on stage. He just carried it, quietly, the way he carried everything else. And when people asked him about Bob, he would smile, polite, distant. "He's a genius," Jackson would say, "one of the greatest." And that was all. Because some things don't need to be explained, some wounds don't need to be shown, some endings don't come with closure. They just come with a slow, aching realization that the person you thought would always be there has become a memory, a name, a face in a photograph you don't look at anymore. And you move forward, not because you want to, but because that's what people do. They move forward. They carry what they can. They leave behind what they can't. And they hope that somewhere, in some quiet moment, the people they loved will remember them the way they were, not the way they became. Jackson hoped that. Bob hoped that too, but they never said it. Decades later, Jackson would be playing a show somewhere, maybe a theater, maybe a small club, maybe a festival, and someone in the crowd would shout out a request, one of Bob's songs, one of the old ones, the ones everyone knew, and Jackson would pause, his hands on the guitar, his eyes distant, and he would play it, not because he had to, but because some songs transcend the people who wrote them. Some songs belong to everyone. Some melodies carry memories that are bigger than friendship, bigger than hurt, bigger than pride. And when he played it, he would think about that hallway, about the silence, about the words, about the moment when he chose to walk away instead of staying small. And he would feel grateful, not for the pain, but for the clarity it had given him. Bob would hear about these moments, through friends, through industry people, through the grapevine that connects musicians who orbit each other's lives without ever touching. And he would feel something he couldn't name, something that felt like regret but deeper, something that felt like longing but quieter. And he would almost pick up the phone. Almost. But he never did, because that's who he was. The man who almost reached out, the man who almost said sorry, the man who almost let someone in. Almost, but never quite. And the hallway stayed empty, the lighter stayed closed, and the songs they wrote kept playing, long after the friendship had ended, long after the words had faded, long after the night that changed everything. Because that's what songs do. They outlast the people who wrote them. They carry the things we couldn't say, and they remind us, in their quiet, aching way, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to hold on, but to let go, to walk away from the people who make you smaller, to stop waiting for permission to be yourself, to stop needing validation from those who are too broken to give it, and to keep creating, keep feeling, keep turning pain into beauty and loneliness into connection, because that's what it means to be human, to be hurt, to be misunderstood, to be dismissed by the people you admire, and to keep going anyway, to keep writing songs that nobody asked for, to keep offering your heart to a world that doesn't always handle it with care, to keep believing that somewhere in some small room, your words will reach someone who needs them, someone who feels unseen, someone who feels small, someone who is standing in their own hallway facing their own Bob Dylan, wondering if they're enough, and your song will tell them they are. Not because you're a hero, not because you have all the answers, but because you survived, because you walked through the fire and came out the other side, because you chose yourself, and that choice echoes, long after the confrontation ends, long after the friendship fades, long after the night is forgotten by everyone except the two people who lived it. The echo remains, in the songs, in the silence, in the space between what was said and what was meant. And somewhere, on a dark beach or in an empty dressing room or in a quiet moment before sleep, two men remember, and wonder, and carry on,